Thank you, Sue. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this annual general meeting of the Business Board, which was originally scheduled for May, moved to November as a result of COVID-19, disrupting the manner in which our meetings are held. Despite the fact that we continue to meet in this virtual setting, I'm pleased to welcome members of the press and public who are able to attend. I would also like to extend a welcome to Councillor Bridget Smith, who has been invited to today's meeting as an observer from the Combined Authority. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all board members to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted except when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make comments should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask the question, and then mute it again to allow the officers to respond. There is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. I would remind the board, officers and members of the public that all virtual meetings will be recorded. To ensure everyone is online and present, can we please confirm our names so attendance can be registered? Tina.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Faye.
Present.
Amir.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Amir. Good afternoon. Nikki.
Yeah, I'm here.
Jason. Okay, Jason sent his apologies. He'll be with us shortly. Andy.
Yeah, I'm here.
Nitin, we have apologies from, I believe. Rebecca.
Good afternoon.
Rebecca Stevens. Good afternoon, Rebecca. Kelly Swingler.
Hi, Austin. Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Kelly. Good afternoon. Mayor James Palmer.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Good afternoon, James. Councillor John Holditch.
Present.
John, and myself, Austin Adams. Nick, do we have reports of any other apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. We have apologies from Mark Dorset, from Al Kingsley, and from Nitin Patel. And Jason Mallard is going to be here shortly, he says.
Thank you. This is an opportunity to declare pecuniary interests or any other conflicts of interests. Do members have any conflicts to declare? If you could raise your hand, please, electronically. Don't see any.
Chair, I think Tina was wishing to
Okay, I can't find the hand raising thing. I'm a bit behind on Zoom. Yeah, I just want to say that NIAB has is in receipt of funds from the local growth fund and to build this agritech incubator. So
Noted. Okay, thank you, Tina. If anyone is having difficulty raising their hand, please shout or wave furiously. I can only see a number of people on the screen at any one time, but try and capture my attention. All right, moving on. Item 1.2, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of September. We are asked to approve the minutes of two meetings as correct records. The first of these on the 15th of September. And can I ask any member who has an issue with the accuracy of these minutes to click the raised hand function? So dealing firstly with the 15th of September meeting. I don't see anything. So we'll take that as carried. Thank you. The second meeting was held on the 19th of October 2020. And can I now ask any member who does not agree with the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, to click the raised hand function for that meeting. Tina.
So, raise my hand, but it's not that I don't agree. It's just that I'd made a note to myself that on page 21, and I think that is still in the minutes, there's a reference to March 2020, and I just think it's a mistake. It shouldn't read 2020. I think it should be 2021.
On page 21.
Mhm.
On the fourth paragraph up, yes, bottom line. I think I would agree with you. Okay, we'll note that for the record. Thank you, Tina. Well spotted. Good job. Accepting that modification, I'd like to move forward that those minutes are carried in their current form. If anyone has any other objections.
Austin, on the same page, the second last paragraph also says March 2020. Should that not be 21? Clarified that cities and local growth unit expected
I
infrastructure.
believe you're correct, yes. Yeah. So 2 typos to note.
Yeah.
Nick, if you could note that, please.
I shall do, Chair. I think they were actually picked up by the finance officer, but I shall amend them in the final
All
copy.
right, perfect. Okay, thank you. Do officers have any further updates to report on the action log to those already included in the agenda that we'll come to during the course of the meeting? All very quiet. Okay, thank you. Andy?
It was just a question to get an update on where we were with membership of GCP and what happened subsequent to the board meeting last time.
Now, let me try and deal with that. There have been a number of interactions between officers of the Combined Authority and the chief exec of the GCP. And as we sit at the moment, we're waiting for their final clarification as to what direction they want to take. And we've asked for that to be presented to us in writing, and we still haven't received it, to my knowledge. That was as of yesterday. And thank you, Andy. Tina, you've got a hand raised. Is that from before? Or?
No, it's another question. So, in relation to the action log, we were asked to send in this list of our 10 contacts, and it's not stated in there. And it's been so long since I sent mine in. I'd like reminding of what was going to happen to that list, what purpose it had.
Is Dom on the call, or I'll try and answer that for him?
He's there. He's there.
Sorry, just on mute. Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Tina. So just in response to that, we have collated the stakeholder details from each member. There are a couple outstanding which we're just chasing up, Amir and Mark. And then what we're going to try and do, we're going to try to utilise that to support the PR promotional activity that we're undertaking as part of the LERS and rollout of the COVID dashboard that we produced as part of that evidence base. So we are collating the information. We're working with Comms colleague in terms of the listing and who do we send, who do we engage with in terms of stakeholders. So thank you for supplying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Okay, thank you for the questions and the updates on the action log. It's pleasing to see that there are very few outstanding actions. Let's move on, please, to item 1.3, public questions. My understanding is that there are no public questions received. Perhaps, Nick, you could confirm that?
No, Chair, there were no questions received.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 2.1, the budget and performance report. Can I invite the finance manager, Vanessa Ainsworth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I believe you were introducing me, but I was being connected at the same time. So hopefully you can hear me now.
Perfect timing.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon and good afternoon, board members. As part of our normal financial update to the board, we're presenting the finances to the end of September. The report is laid out in its usual fashion, discussing revenue and capital figures. The revenue items, there are a number of items where hopefully I've given further clarification, which will answer any questions, and is the same on the capital. However, I'm more than happy to answer questions should you have any on today's paper.
Thank you, Vanessa. Questions? Tina?
The healthcare skills, can you give us a bit more, a bit of information on why that is so underspent?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're referring to the one from the skills.
Yeah, from the skills.
Yeah. It was a pilot scheme from Department of Work and Pensions that started just over a year ago. It did suffer with some delays and some change requests created by the company running the plan, and we're waiting for information from Department of Work and Pensions. It was relating to the types of courses they were able to offer, and the time, because it was a pilot, the initial time span was very, very short, and there was no way it was able to be delivered in that period of time. The delays took about 6 to 8 months between the company and the Department of Work and Pensions to get it finalised. So the project is running, and it will continue to run next year. It will just take longer to deliver than the original plan was.
Yeah, it just leapt out at me because of the current situation. You know, it's the last thing you'd want to be delayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Vanessa. Are there any other questions?
Austin, I've got one. Sandy.
Yeah.
So just on the it was a really helpful report. Thank you. On page 37, the University of Peterborough Capital project, I was just looking at the forecast, and there's a reasonable level of monthly spend, and then a really chunky 11.5 million forecast in the last month of the financial year. Is that because that's when a particular bill falls due? So are we confident that that's not going to slip?
That doesn't refer to the actual LGF investment. That's the CPCA investment into the project, and it is as soon as the share agreements are signed, that is us purchasing the equity in the building. So that money will be transferred. The reason it's just sitting at the end of the year is that we don't know exactly when that's going to be happening. It could be happening in November. It may happen in December. It may spread out to March. It all depends on how long it takes for the final share agreements to be signed and that money to be transferred across. So it's nothing to do with the slippage or actual investing or paying for the bills. It's that transfer between the CPCA and the property company.
Okay. And is there any implication if it slips over into the next financial year? Does that create a problem?
No, it shouldn't create a problem. However, I would be extremely surprised if it does, because obviously, as you're well aware, Andy, the project is moving ahead. Everything is being built. It is purely the legal agreements that are delaying us at the moment.
Yeah, it always looks worrying when you've got in the last month of the year a big bill that looks like it's going to be settled. It always seems to run up to the deadline if you're not careful. John was reading there.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that the next board report that I bring to you, it will show that money already gone.
Thank you, Vanessa. Are there any other questions? John. John T. Hill, I see your hand is raised. Did you want to speak, John?
Just taking time to unmute as my hand's not very quick. Yeah, just to really give Andy a bit of reassurance. That, as Vanessa says, this has nothing to do with the spend profile. This is the investment in shares. And I can assure you, because I was just on the phone before this meeting with the lawyers, ARU and Peterborough City Council and CPCA are smack on schedule to sign the shareholders agreement by the end of the month. And it does matter actually if it's delayed, because unless we transfer the money into, and Rob will no doubt have concerns about this, unless we transfer the money into PropCo, which can be the only order giver for the builder, because it is a building for PropCo. If we can't get that order out, we will slip on that 22nd, on the September 2022 delivery deadline. So we really do have to get the shareholders agreement signed and that money into PropCo in order to lay the full order. I have used my position as the director of PropCo under provisions for the CPCA to fund, I think, 360k to get the groundworks done and get going. But I have limited ability to fund that work. So we really do need to get that money transferred, and the shareholders agreement will allow us to do that.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right. I can't see any other raised hands. Then Vanessa, from the papers, you're recommending to the board to note the update and financial position relating to the revenue and capital funding lines within the Business and Skills Directorate. So thank you for that. I see that Jason's joined the meeting, I think.
Yes, hi, Austin, and apologies again.
No, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Welcome. Can I just ask, Jason, if you have or need to declare any pecuniary interest or any other conflicts of interest with regard to the meeting before we proceed?
No, I do not.
Thank you. So going back to item 2.1, I would like to remind the members that recommendations to the business board are carried by consensus unless there is an objection, in which case there will be a vote. In the event of a vote, the Democratic Services Officer will ask each member whether they wish to vote in favour or against the recommendations, or indeed abstain. As this recommendation here is just to note, can I take it that we all agree that this has been noted and move on to the next agenda item, please? Any objections, please shout. Okay, thank you. Moving on then to item 2.2, the Local Growth Fund Programme Management Review. Can I invite the Strategic Funds Manager, Steve Clark, to present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Business Board members. So this is the regular update to the Business Board. I'd like to take the report in two parts, if possible, running through the main update parts first, and then following up with a particular decision on funding grants with the remaining 2 million. So this paper sets out operational updates for the LGF with progress to the 16th of October. And it covers, so first up, Local Growth Fund grant payment. We had received our 2/3 of this year's local growth funding allocation in May. We now have received the final third, which was paid on the 30th of October to the combined authority. So that now gives the Business Board reassurance that the funds are all in and it can fulfil its project commitments on that front. The Local Growth Fund programme position. As of 16th of October, the LGF programme had 20 projects, including the COVID Capital Grant Scheme in delivery. There were 6 projects that were funded, approved for funding already by the Business Board, which are still in contract and funding agreement negotiation. As John has already mentioned, many of those are very close now to being signed off via shareholder agreements or grant funding agreements. Also at the last Business Board meeting, a project was approved, which meant that we had at that time 353,000 of LGF left to allocate. But following that meeting on the 15th of October, we had a project, the Brampton Hub Launchpad project, withdrew from their grant award of 2.4 million, which means that as of today, we have a new balance of 2.753 million left in LGF to be allocated and spent before March 2021. The current programme expenditure, which obviously runs slightly behind awards, is currently at 91,477,000. And in terms of completed projects, we have 22 projects that are now subject to evaluation over the coming months as part of our monitoring and evaluation plan. Growth deal monitoring return. Officers have prepared the Q2 2020-21 submission. I believe that's actually been submitted now to the Cities and Local Growth Unit, but attached to Appendix A is the dashboard from that particular report that we submitted. The LGF team continues to record issues on its issues log for projects in delivery and in pre-contract negotiation. And you'll find those at Appendix B of the report. And also here at 5.4 in this report, you'll see that we have our usual RAG rating, which is lifted from the Cities and Local Growth Unit report. And as before, at the previous board, the transport projects remain many are amber or amber green. Everything else is fully green, and there are no red flag projects. The capital grants I'll come back to. Skipping on, Eastern Agritech Growth Initiative. Today we are now tracking 81 projects, and since the last Business Board, the Eastern Agritech Programme Board has met 5 times, considered 15 applications. 12 have been approved and 3 rejected. The Programme Manager is currently expecting 4 applications. Actually, as of yesterday, I believe he now has 7 applications to be considered during November and December, with the remaining 318,000 to award, looking like it will be likely awarded during those meetings. So there is also an ask here regards the management of the project. The Agritech project has run for 7 years and has been funded by a percentage of the various funds we're managing, LGF, Regional Growth Fund and New Anglia LEP. But obviously the project in itself is likely to close now at the end of March 2021. And there is an ask here in the paper for the Business Board to recommend to the Combined Authority to ring fence a further 100,000 of funds from the scheme, just to handle final claims, create a full programme evaluation and report, and full programme closure and evaluation. This 100,000 would not include any funds from New Anglia Partnership, and therefore does not require their approval at the same time. Local growth funding monitoring and update. We continue to monitor all projects on a monthly and quarterly basis. Appendix D to the report shows our current position with those projects as part of that gathering. The deeper dive evaluation, Metro Dynamics and their specialist Exogen are currently working on that. We have had a draft report from them on the historic 11 early projects funded by the previous LEP. But we've actually sent that report back for a bit more work. We felt there was a bit of work to do on that one. So we will bring that back to the Business Board as soon as possible during November. LGF processes review and pipeline development. As was agreed at a previous board meeting, Andy Neely led off a review of our current processes with a couple of the LGF officers. That review is attached to this paper, and basically looked at what went well, what didn't go so well, and best practice. And as part of that, looked at other organisations by way of a peer comparison. What was clear, and I'm sure Andy might chip in on this at the end. What was clear was we have a fairly robust and transparent process, but of course we can always be open to making changes to the current process and make some improvements on the current process. And those were highlighted as, development of a pipeline of projects, looking at the initial submissions and a full application process, an entrepreneurs panel, maybe expanding the remit of that panel, and the external appraisal, maybe expanding the remit there slightly. So basically those 5 areas are shown in the report, and the appendix for that is at Appendix E. In terms of pipeline development, you have attached here to the report at Appendix F a proposed draft plan for pipeline development over the coming year. Sets out looking in line with current activity that's going on, so strategic priorities in relation to the LERS sector strategies, local investment strategy refresh, and obviously officers will continue to work that plan, but would welcome business board members' input and updates towards that plan. The Getting Building Fund update. The business board at its extraordinary meeting on the 19th of October obviously recommended approval of the University Phase 2 Manufacturing Materials Centre. The Mayor has since signed the decision notice, which was made on the 5th of November. So just noting that that decision was made after consultation with the CA board at the Leaders Strategy meeting on the 28th of October. So that's the main updates throughout the paper. I'm now going to circle back to the COVID grants section. So it's noted that the COVID grant scheme that ran during the summer 2020 obviously is closed, has been paying out the funds. In the report as of 16th of October, it was 2.2 million. As of yesterday, it's 3.262 million. And so that existing scheme is gradually paying its money out. But noted in the report was that there is 2.753 million still to allocate of LGF. We have a project to consider on the next paper at 710,000. So the business board is asked to consider the options for allocating the remaining 2,043,000 towards one of 2 options. The first option is restarting the COVID grant scheme, which we ran during the summer. The key outcome for this option would be the creation and safeguarding of jobs as before. The scheme criteria would be broadly as previously recommended by the business board, and is attached to this paper at Appendix C. Obviously, the criteria could be reviewed to fit in with the current COVID-19 impacts and consideration to targeting and promotion of the scheme to applicants who were unsuccessful in the last round. Decision for triggering this scheme is asked for in the paper by way of delegated authority to the Director of Business and Skills. The second option for the 2.043 million would be to place the funding into the Business Growth Service, the capital grants element of the new Business Growth Service, which will be targeting companies with rebound and regrowth potential, seeking to create higher value, sustainable jobs. The delivery of running this grant program will be negotiated as a contract variation with the Business Growth Service. And obviously the award of grants would have to be carried out before the end of March 2021. So just a few points of addition to those two options. For running with option one, the COVID capital grant scheme, obviously there's a few practical thoughts to bear in mind. We would obviously need to gear up staff resource to handle the inevitable fast peak of applicants that we would likely get. We would need to recontract the due diligence and appraisal contractors. There is actually a huge latent backlog of applications from the previous scheme. There's 6.752 million from 200 applications that were not serviced last time. So they would all be in the mix, no doubt. We did say when we closed the other scheme that we would give those businesses first notice of any additional funds. So there would likely be literally 2 or 3 weeks, and that 2 million would be utilised. Without changing any of the criteria specifically, we created a value for money output last time of 19,200 per job, if you count the new jobs. If you count safeguarded jobs, it came out at 6,800 per job. There would be no way in this instance potentially to control the targeting if we run as a first come first serve as we did last time. Also, I'm not sure it would be wise to advertise the new 2 million because it would be tricky to service the demand potentially without disappointing new firms who may not be able to get a chance. And obviously this could cause disquiet within the business community if they were failing to get through the application process again. On the business growth service, option 2, obviously this would be a new product to the marketplace with criteria focused on companies with capacity to rebound and regrow. Being a new grant to the marketplace means new applicants can apply in parallel to the applicants from the previous scheme, but obviously only if they're meeting this new criteria attached to the new scheme. Obviously, contracts for the new contractor can be negotiated before the end of November 2020, and mobilisation would be handled by them. And the process for appraisal and due diligence would be handled by the business growth service contractor. And currently, the contract for the business growth service is seeking to deliver a target of £5,500 per job output for the money that we are wanting to put through those grant schemes in that programme. So that's the two options for the programme there. I would like to also include John to add some summary points to all that I've said there.
Thanks, Steve. When members are considering the two options in front of them, they might want to consider them from the perspective of two issues: material difference and impact. On material difference, the furlough scheme will pump around £170 million into firms to meet wage costs just in the next 27 or during the 27 days of lockdown to the 2nd of December. On top of that, you've got business rates related grants, of which we now know that there are £33 million worth going to local companies in the coming period. On top of that, you've got the old discretionary grant, if you remember, because business rates grants in the first lockdown didn't meet the needs of everybody, a follow-up discretionary grant was created. It's there again. It's called the Additional Restrictions Grant this time, and that's another 17 million. So you've got 50 million of grants and 170 million of furlough out there at the same time. So on that material difference, one must ask what will be the additional impact of our additional 2 million on that scenario. On impact, if our aim is to create some form of post-lockdown recovery grant, and don't forget our grant from LGF can only ever be capital. It will take time to mobilise, as Steve has said. So in effect, this isn't an emergency revenue grant to help you with survival in the next month. This is still a recovery grant with capital. And if we were to try and create lockdown, post-lockdown growth recovery grants that maximise the number of new jobs, then we do have to consider another way of looking at the two numbers that Steve gave you, the 19,000 and the 6,000. And remember that the 5 million that we gave away earlier on created 800 jobs, most of them safeguarded. And so we could expect about 320 jobs, most of them safeguarded, if we put it through COVID. Conversely, if you put it through the Business Growth Service, which targets high growth companies and gives away the growth grant as part of growth coaching that helps companies orientate themselves to new opportunities, evidence tells us that you're looking to create between twice and 4 times as many jobs through that route, most of those being created rather than safeguarded. So yeah, over to debate, I guess.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the clarifications and the background and the relative merits. There are a number of different discrete issues here. I wonder if we could just maybe deal with them one at a time. Let's deal with the question of the 2.043 million and what direction we think that should take. The recommendation here is to delegate to the Director of Business and Skills in consultation with the Monitoring Officer, Lead Member of Finance and Section 33 to approve launching that grant scheme. I guess I'm interested to hear from the board members what direction they think that should take. Tina.
So I'm a bit confused. This is the last point that we were talking about. So does it go into the growth fund or the capital grant scheme? Right. So I had a question about, so the capital grant scheme, is this also where you talked about opening it up to address sole traders, which wasn't the case last time? Because right, Steve?
Yes, well, there was a different scheme, a micro scheme that was run separate to the COVID scheme, which was aimed more at the smaller business sole trader. This scheme last time ran at five and above employees and limited companies, and I would suggest it would be the same criteria, unless, of course, the business board want to explore that route.
Could I make a legal point on that? It would be very difficult for us to go to sole traders because of the rules of the LGF, because it is for SMEs. In the summer, when we did have a micro grant, we actually used CPCA gain share money, which doesn't have the same constraints on it. So using LGF, we couldn't really go to sole traders this time because we used CPCA money last time to do that.
I suppose there's something that's sort of nagging me. It's all very well, these impact figures look very convincing, you should go for the Business Growth Fund, but you're targeting a certain sector by doing that, and perhaps leaving behind some of the business areas that have been most badly hit by this. You know, you're not going to have your restaurants and your cafes on your high growth business list, are you? So that would be my concern.
If I could respond to that, all the evidence on high growth companies, despite lots of anecdotal perceptions, high growth companies are not high growth sectors. They don't exist anymore in life sciences than they exist amongst funeral directors. And one of the fastest growing companies at the moment is Gusto, who are just about to be a unicorn. and they're in food, retail, online. So no, I'm not suggesting for a moment your local pub's going to be a huge high growth and a lot of the growth grants will go to them. But it isn't to specific sectors. High growth companies are everywhere.
Thank you, John. We've got lots of interest in people
Chair,
to speak. I wonder if we could hear from James, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's been really interesting. I've been out now to 8 or 10 different businesses who have received grants from the Capital Grant Fund and from the Micro Grant Fund. So I've been to businesses where there have been as small as 2 people trading, up to ones that are 40 or 50 people, members of staff. And the difference that those capital grants made to those businesses, the confidence it's given them, it can't be explained really until you actually go in and you see the faces of the people who've benefited and they speak with the absolute joy of what they've been able to achieve from this fund. It really has been, in my view, an exceptional success, and I commend John and his team for what they did. And the one thing that comes across constantly from the people who run these businesses is how easy it was and how quickly they got hold of the money and how quickly they were able to turn it around. And I think that that has been the absolute key for them. And what I'm hearing from businesses that I'm visiting is a massive amount of confidence in the future, a massive amount of confidence in actually what will happen post COVID and post the end of December. We know that Brexit would be dominating our conversation if it were not for COVID. And certainly the businesses that I spoke to were saying, yeah, we're going to take on more staff. We're just going to wait to hear what the deal is with Europe, and then we're going to look at hiring in January. I think that from that perspective, I think what we did, what you did as a business board, was absolutely spot on in the spring. But I do think that doing the same thing again might miss the point of what we need to achieve over the course of the next year to 2 years. And I say that for 2 reasons. The first reason is what is clear from the figures we have is that we're probably going to be looking at 20,000 people out of work in the short term, certainly because of this pandemic. And a significant number of those people are going to need to be retrained to get new jobs and new opportunities. And I think, therefore, to turn our focus towards those people is the right thing to do. And secondly, the lobbying that I'm doing as a mayor into government is that a lot of it is based around, we lobby on all sorts of things, but we're very, very keen, because of the success of the Capital Grant Scheme, to bid into government for business development fund money to allow us to do what we did with capital grant schemes every year. And so I think that because of that, I think turning our focus towards getting people into work, I think is the right thing to do. And I think getting money out of government to enable us to repeat the success of the capital grant scheme, but doing it year on year with a fund that's there year on year, I think is probably the best way to work here. So entirely happy. I mean, I'm not a voting member of this board, but I think that what's being suggested here seems to me to have a lot of gravitas about it.
Austin, may I, Samir, could I have a comment as well, please?
Sure.
Yeah. So Austin, I think in terms of bang for the buck, we would get more from the business growth service. And I think, like John says, over 200 million has been put into the furlough scheme and other schemes, which are generally helping. But here, we could really focus and help high growth companies and have a chance of really getting more jobs for the amount of money that we spend. So that's really my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. A number of other hands raised. Jason?
Yes, I just wanted to second what Amir said, is that from my experience, particularly in the life science sector and a lot of the promising companies now that could benefit from the growth services, I feel that that extra 2 million towards preparing for the future, teaching companies how to navigate this new normal that we're entering in and actually hopefully thrive and really benefit from some of the changes that have been occurring as a result of COVID, would be a better use of the funds than going into the capital investment. I think this is an opportunity for us to be forward thinking. And to Tina's point earlier, if we can really help accelerate and ensure the success of those high growth industries, I think that some of the other businesses that may not be on the surface as high growth will benefit from it, because there'll be more people and more jobs. So let's not get too focused that everything has to be directly for securing and safeguarding jobs today. We should ensure that we are putting some funds towards the high potential job growers of the future.
Thank you, Jason. Faye, you have your hand raised.
I do, thank you. I think we're kind of coming to a consensus anyway. I think the officers might have made it on the document quite difficult to choose, quite frankly, because they did such a great job with the COVID grants. They were efficient, the speed to market, all those types of things. But I do agree, I think it's from a communications point of view, there will be a lot of disappointed businesses if we do go that approach. So I would also advocate going with the business growth service, because it's about ongoing sustainability and accountability, and in terms of overall message, it's about regrowth, it's about rebuilding, and I think they're the messages that we should be going after from a funding and a business point of view.
Thank you, Faye. Andy.
So a couple of points. I mean, I agree with the consensus of where we're reaching. I don't actually think these were two options at all. And the way they were presented meant that the only sensible choice was the second option, at the way that that was presented, in terms of not really presenting two feasible alternative options. And so I just wanted to register that, because I absolutely agree with where we're going to get to, but I don't understand why the first option was even on the paper. And if it was, and given it how it was presented, it should have been much clearer in the paper. That was clearly not the preferred option. The only question I've got about the second option is, does the business growth service contractor actually have the capacity to do this and to deliver it? Because they're in starting up a whole host of other things mode. I just want to be reassured they've actually got the capacity to take this on.
Thank you, Andy. John, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair. Yes, they do. In fact, the tender was put out on the basis that there would be 6 million of growth grants from the get-go. We of course took 3 million out of that pot in the summer to fund the COVID grants. So in fact, the supplier was expecting 6 million to be there, and actually only 3 million was there. So we'd be putting 2 of that 3 million back.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands raised. Then just on that particular decision point, I'm hearing that we're converging around moving in the direction of the business growth service for the funds. Does anyone want to speak against that? Tina?
They are not entirely comfortable for the reason that James has said. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the success of the capital grant scheme, and I think although the business growth service has promise, it really is untested. So I had one question in relation to this bidding for government for annual funds. What's the timing of that?
John, are you in a position to respond to that?
Chairman, on that, or quite happy for an officer to take it. But to be honest with you, it's a bid, and you know, we're amongst the other mayors. We're bidding into this. So there's no timing or no confirmation, but we have regular meetings with government, and it's part of what we're trying to achieve as an M9. The difference between the combined authority in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and all of the other mayors is that we're the only ones with the business board or the LEP integral to our service and to what we're trying to achieve. But so I can't say to you, Tina, we will get that money. What I'm saying to you is that we've got a strong evidence base through what we've achieved with the capital grants to get it, and we know that it's part of what government are considering through their devolution white paper.
So is it a bid next year or a bid subsequent year?
So if we were to get the funds, perhaps John would come in and suggest when they would come forward. But yeah, we're having those conversations are ongoing. But I can't say to you, Tina, or to anybody else on the board that it's a guarantee that we will get them. You know, and there's a lot of conjecture. You know, government have used COVID-19 to draw in rather than expand out with devolution, and they've been stung pretty hard by Andy Burnham up in Manchester. So, you know, I can't say to you 100% where government's commitment is what it was to devolution 6 months ago, but I know the Prime Minister is still very committed to devolution. So, but I just can't give you the answer you want.
I suppose I was just asking: is this a bid for next year, or is it a bid for 3 years hence? You know, is it an ongoing bid?
It's an ongoing bid. It's ongoing discussions, and if we can get the okay, then we will try and get the money as soon as possible. But there's nothing on paper to say it will happen. I'm just saying to you that's where we're trying to bid in to get that fund evolved.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Tina. Is there anyone else who feels strongly that we shouldn't go with what feels like the majority view to go in the direction of the Business Growth Service? Okay, then I'm proposing we run with that as a recommendation tied to item B. Let's just go back and revisit some of the other points. Steve raised an awful lot of different dimensions to this report. With hindsight, it may have been better to break them out to separate issues, but nevertheless, we have the recommendation to carry forward the 100,000 of current funding allocated to the Eastern Agri-Tech Growth Initiative scheme to enable the closeout of that scheme. Does anyone feel passionately about that they have any objections to that in any way, shape or form, or would like to debate the point or have any questions? You're fine with that, Tina? You're our resident expert in this field. Okay.
Yeah, I am. I think that's been a highly successful fund. I mean, as you say, it's been going 7 years. It started some time ago. And it really has done a lot of good, but we do need, you know, I think monitoring is vital.
Agreed. Thank you, Tina. Okay, we'll move with that recommendation. There's one point I'd like to go back to, which is the work that Andy and the team have been doing on the process and governance around the decision making around the selection of projects and the like. There are a number of recommendations there that need to get translated into discrete and very specific actions. Could we capture those in the action log so that we don't lose sight of them and we make sure they're all properly closed out? Steve?
That should be fine, I would have thought. I'm looking at Dom.
Okay, thanks, chaps.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so in an attempt to move this particular item on, then the business board is being asked to note the update, to put forward the recommendation of the combined authority as to how we will utilise the 2,043,000. To recommend to the combined authority that we delegate authority to the Doctor of Business Skills, the 73 officer and the finance lead and monitoring officer to manage that on our behalf. to recommend to the Combined Authority approval of the 100,000 carryover for the Agritech Growth Initiative. Are we all done on that? Rebecca, you've raised your hand. Is there a point you'd like to make?
I would. It's a plea, really. I know the evaluation on the completed projects is due to come forward in the coming months, but I was just struck by the amount in this report that talks about the delivery in terms of timescales of these projects rather than the delivery of the expected outcomes. And I was wondering if there was a way in which we could have a bit more visibility of the work in progress of these outcomes. Obviously, each project will have different outcomes that we will have chosen to progress when we chose to agree that the funding was forthcoming, including number of jobs. And some of those jobs will come forward during delivery and some won't be realised until way after delivery. And I wondered if there was some sort of way that we could get a bit more insight into how things were progressing in terms of that as the projects are going on, so that we're not waiting until it's all over to find out whether it's been successful or not.
It's a very good point, Rebecca. It would be very useful information to have when we're looking at other projects to understand what's good, bad and indifferent.
We've attempted to do that in the monitoring appendix to the report. You will note that we've now got all the outputs listed, or the projected outputs that were forecast, and we've got an actual column which is tracking how those projects are doing. And we are, as the evaluation work is done and as my team are doing the monitoring, we are populating that out. So it's obviously only jobs at the moment, but the plan is to start looking at some of the other output measures too, and start to show those actuals today against forecast. So we're working on that.
Thank you, Steve. I see Rochelle's hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one in relation to the completeness of the recommendation. So it's being proposed from the Chair that the money be allocated to be disposed of through the new Business Growth Service. Can you have that seconded, Chair, so we can record the decision making on that? Thank you.
Would someone like to second that proposal?
I can second that.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you, Chair. And
my working assumption is we won't need to take that to a vote. I only heard one person speak against it.
Just for completeness, Chair, could we vote just so if there's anybody else? Thank you.
Okay, could I ask for anyone to make it known if they want to vote against that recommendation? I don't see any hands raised. Please shout.
Chair, sorry, I believe there are a couple who are raising their hands. I think Kelly.
Yeah, myself, and I think Tina.
Sorry, Kelly, I couldn't see your hand raised.
Okay.
But are you voting against it?
Voting against, yes.
Okay, thank you. And Tina?
Sorry, yes, I'm voting against.
Voting against. Okay, thank you. So on that basis, the decision is carried by a majority. Thank you for everyone. Are you happy with that, Rochelle, from a process point of view?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. There's an awful lot of things going on there. Appreciate there's some really great work and we're making good progress with a lot of different things there. Very, very much appreciated to all concerned. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just for completeness, we're assuming that the rest of the decision is consensus, C, D and E.
If anyone has any objections to C, D and E, please raise them now. I don't see any. We'll take that as a consensus on all of the other points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Steve, we're staying with you now. I think we're moving on to item 2.3, local growth fund project proposals. And before you lurch into that, if I may, let me just advise everyone that this report contains an appendix which is confidential and exempt from publication under paragraph 3, part 1 of the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. If any members of the board wish to discuss or ask questions on any of the information contained in these appendices, we will need to do so in private session. Does any member want to discuss the detail of the appendices? I'm not seeing anyone.
Austin, I'd like to comment on it, but I think I could do it without revealing the details.
Give it a try. Rochelle will jump in and stop you if you do. What would you like to say, Rebecca?
I'd like to comment on the number of jobs created and having clarity over what that final figure is, particularly in the light of how we're going to measure it going forward, further to my previous comment about outcomes. I appreciate as they're going through this process, all the applicants may, their figures may vary slightly as they go through the various stages, but it's us being clear about what we expect that final figure to be and then holding them to it.
Okay, so on the basis that we're taking that as a very generic question about process rather than the specifics of what sits within the confidential appendices, it's not a matter of whether we agree with the number or not, but I think your question is how do we measure it and hold people accountable going forward? I'm not sure who's best placed to try and help us to answer that question. Dom, perhaps, as a start? Steve?
Well, all of our projects are subject to any conditions that the appraiser places in their external report. And the appraiser has mentioned about evidence for the plan for the job creation. So we would use that as we would do with all our other projects as a condition. And once signed off through a grant funding agreement, they will be held to those conditions and through that legal grant funding agreement to those outputs. That's how we do it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. All right, on the basis that there are no specific questions that we want to explore with regard to the confidential appendices, could I ask Steve to present the report on this proposal then, please? Sure, thanks, Chair. The Business Board is responsible for allocating LGF, and the Business Board is asked to consider recommending this project, having completed local assurance process and an independent external assessment. The board may recall that this project, or rather a variant of this project, was declined at the Business Board last time in September 2020, but the Business Board did issue an invitation for the project applicant to reapply. So therefore, using investment prospectus criteria and our local assurance process, the project has resubmitted, and the application has been through the independent external assessment and entrepreneurs panel and comes to the Business Board for consideration. The project is submitted from Cambridge City Council and comprises of a grant request of 710,000 against a project cost of 770,000. The project itself is to make COVID adaptations to Cambridge City Centre, at streets emanating from the Market Square, to be adapted and through street closures and street furniture to be repurposed to be able to be used for
hospitality and leisure businesses to continue operating in obviously a new post-COVID world. The project aims to mobilise and deploy the capital before the end of March 2021. And as has been noted, there are a couple of conditions which the external appraiser has put forward. One about the job estimate and the plan, and the other one is about website development and it being treated as capital expenditure. Other than that, the project was recommended, so the Business Board is asked to consider the Cambridge Visitor Welcome Project for recommendation to the Combined Authority Board to approve funding. And obviously that funding would be subject to conditions proposed by external appraisers report in our grant funding agreement.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions that wouldn't take us down into the confidential information? Any high-level questions for Steve? Is there anyone on the board who sat on the evaluation panel that maybe want to speak about this project at all? I'm not seeing anyone.
I wasn't on this evaluation panel, but I was on the previous one, and I think this proposal is much better, much more immediate, and much more impactful. So I'd support it.
Never waste a crisis. James.
Apologies, I was on the panel, and I think when we looked at it the first time around, the proposal that Cambridge had put forward was really a 4 or 5 year project, and it wasn't about trying to tackle the crisis in the short term. What they've come back with, I think, is really exciting. If you know Cambridge, you think the Peace Hill area, that's where the Corn Exchange is, that's where the theatre is. To pedestrianise that area, cafe tables and chairs in it, I think it could be transformational for the city. And it's something that probably could have been done many years ago, but it was difficult to do in normal times. And yet I think there's a great opportunity here. So yeah, I was very impressed. I was very disappointed with the first Cambridge proposal, but very impressed by the second.
Thank you, James. I'm seeing a lot of nodding on the visuals. So can I ask if anyone would have any objection to us not unanimously approving this recommendation? Okay, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. We're staying with you, I believe. Moving on to the second investment related opportunity 2.4 with Steve. Again, this report contains appendices which are confidential and exempt from publication under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. If any members of the board wish to discuss or ask questions on any of the information contained in these appendices, we will need to do so in private session. Does any member want to discuss the appendices? I don't see anyone. In that case, we will consider the report, and at this point, and will not, discuss or ask questions on the information contained in the exempt appendices. Can I invite Steve again to present the report on this, please? And supported by the Principal Solicitor for Property Planning and Highways, Peter Geach, is also here to answer any questions that we might have around this. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this paper is to ask the Business Board to approve partial recovery of the local grant fund investment of 10.5 million into the legacy project, which was the vocational training centre at IMET at Alconbury Weald. The paper outlines the remaining best option for the business board to consider and to recommend an approach to dispose of the main asset to recover some funding. In parallel, the business board is asked to consider a refocusing of the existing legal grant funding agreement to enable the equipment paid for by the LGF grant to continue to be utilised to achieve skills outcomes to the benefit of the current and future cohorts of learners. So the background here is that the LEP invested, the previous LEP invested into this project in 2016, and the management of the centre and the applicant at the time, Huntingdon Regional College, subsequently ran into financial difficulty and merged with Cambridge Regional College. And since that time, the original outcomes for the centre have largely failed to be materialised, and the centre operating at considerable loss, with the centre actually closing this April and the project shutting down. So, in line with the local assurance framework and national guidance, the combined authority as the accountable body for LGF is charged with approving clawback of funds on underperforming or non-compliant projects. And Cambridge Regional College is the legal entity against which any action to recover funds would be taken. The business board at its meeting on the 26th of May 2020 considered options for reuse or financial recovery of the IMET assets, and agreed to note potential options to the business board in relation to IMET investment, but that would be explored further by the chief officer of the business board. See Appendix A attached to this report for the range of options that were considered. It was considered that legal action, one of the options, was unlikely to result in a successful clawback outcome, as recovery of the original grant value would place Cambridge Regional College under serious financial pressure. And the analysis of those risk and implications was again attached to the paper at Appendix B. So the Director of Business Skills, acting as directed by the Business Board, has explored all the options laid out in that from that May Business Board meeting, with the primary option of finding a vocational educational provider to take over the lease at IMET as the main focus. But having exhausted that now, several educational provider organisations have shown interest in buying the facility or leasing it, but with a view to continuing the activities. But none of those discussions have concluded in a deal. So in early October 2020, the last remaining interested educational party provider withdrew any interest in the site. So this leaves the business board with the option of do nothing, which obviously would be accept the loss of the funds and move on in terms of retracing any steps, or the do something option, which is to work with Cambridge Regional College and Urban and Civic to bring the lease to the market, and this requires an option agreement between the combined authority and Cambridge Regional College, and an agreement with Urban and Civic around the lease sale, freehold land sale, and change of use inclusion within the deal. So the proposed recovery plan we've put together so far is the an agreement, Cambridge Regional College option agreement. This would facilitate Cambridge Regional College release from its obligations under the grant funding agreement in relation to the IMET building, and would also then release the lease for sale. The proposal would also maximise the restitution of monies back to CPCA as the accountable body, and the that would require a separate agreement with Urban and Civic around how the treatment of the lease was handled. So the agreement with CRC has two strands of outcome. An option of assignment of the existing lease to CPCA, which we can call upon to assign to a new party who would be buying the lease, or an educational provider to carry on those outcomes. Or the other option would be a surrender of the lease to the landlord. Both of those agreement, that option agreement with CRC means that CPCA gets contractual control at the moment a buyer is found, rather than actual control, and therefore would release CRC from its obligations in return for the sale receipts. The urban and civic agreement would need to be put in place, and we've been talking to Urban and Civic as the landlord. We've had several positive meetings, and they are very much keen to see the reutilisation of the building right in the heart of their prime development site. So they're happy with the options that we have proposed thus far, and the happy that the preferred option is a surrender. The preferred option is an assignment to a new buyer in the marketplace, and also they're interested in providing the freehold side of the building instead of just the lease, so that the value from the sale can be maximised. Obviously, a freehold being far more attractive and more valuable than just the lease on its own. And they're happy to share a 70-30 split, in favour 70% to them, 30% to us, of any overage above the value of the lease by turning it into a freehold. So in relation to modifying the grant funding agreement, so the sorry, I've jumped a bit there. So in line with local assurance framework and national guidance, the CPCA, as the accountable body, is charged with approving any changes or modifications to existing grant funding agreements. And the Business Board, as administrator of the ELGE, should make clear recommendations to the CPCA on this front. The Business Board is asked to consider there's three parts to the recovery plan, as I've kind of outlined. Firstly, it's the grant funding agreement modification with Cambridge Regional College in relation to the equipment, so they can continue using the equipment at their other sites to deliver educational outcomes to the existing cohort and new cohorts. Secondly, an option agreement with Cambridge Regional College for the release of the lease and conditions on the grant funding agreement in our favour to receive the sale receipts. And thirdly, this agreement with Urban and Civic on the sale of the IMEP and treatment of that options. Also in the agreement between CPCA and Urban and Civic, there's also consideration of the marketing of the IMEP and working together, which they are keen to do in terms of how we take this building back to the market and how we manage to market as a freehold through cooperation and agreement to maximise the value.
Thank you, Steve. It's a tricky problem. Appreciate the creative thinking that's gone into trying to weave a path through all the various options to get to the best possible outcome. I'm sure there are going to be some questions here. We're going to have to be careful not to stray into the confidential information. I'll stop you at that. But
Austin, a couple from Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
So it's a clarification question and a question about lessons. The clarification question: if we allow the freehold for the building, in the longer term, what happens to the land? Are you also proposing to sell the land, or do you retain control of the land? So in I'm doing university thinking now, in 50 years time or 100 years time, when the building finally falls down, do we retain the land? Question one. And then question two, it would be really helpful. I'm conscious this was a decision and something that was set up under the previous let, but I think it'd be really helpful to do a review of what the lessons are that we could learn from this, because we've ended up in a situation where this is not what, I mean, clearly things change in the world and businesses encounter all sorts of problems, but we've ended up in a situation where we wouldn't really want to be. And so I think doing a lessons learned to think about what we should make sure we don't do in the future would be really helpful.
Steve, would it be helpful if I took the land law aspects of that?
Yeah, please do, Peter.
So the freehold is currently owned by Urban and Civic, who are in control of the entire site, who are looking to work in conjunction with us using a promotion agreement to possibly sell the freehold, but they've reserved their position on that, and they're doing an analysis at the moment as to whether that's a possibility. And Steve and the team have negotiated a split if there is an uplift above a base point of 70-30, as Steve indicated. So there would be no further control. It would be a fire and forget. We would be selling the freehold on that basis. If we, on the other hand, assign the existing leasehold interest, obviously the freehold is still with Urban and Civic, and we wouldn't have control of that in any event. So either it's a promotion agreement in conjunction with Urban and Civic, or we will be dealing with the existing lease. But in either event, we don't have any control of the freehold.
Thanks, Peter.
I'd got a couple of questions. John, I see your hand raised. John Hill.
I was mindful that we didn't answer Andy's second question on lessons learned. We've already done quite a deep analysis of this. First of all, I'd say this proposal would never have got through independent evaluation and the entrepreneurs panel that we currently have. It was devoid of any business plan, any demand survey, and any marketing plan. It was 100% grant to an organisation to build, and there was no further procurement. Whereas if you compare it, for instance, with the University of Peterborough, a full procurement went on that lasted months and months, that examined in detail things like demand, business plans, and a realistic growth in both students and revenue numbers. None of that was done. It was really quite a scant proposal with very little due diligence on it.
Thank you, John. That's very comforting. I got a couple of questions. In terms of repatriating the funding back into the LGF, there's no question of that being time barred in the sense of the March 21 commitment to do anything sensible with it, or is there?
None.
None.
Yeah,
okay.
it's effectively recycled, so new money can be spent at any point.
Yeah. Then in terms of the recommendations set out here, A through E, this is not a series of options. These are all a series of steps, really, to give you a mandate to go and try and herd the cats to get all the pieces lined up to get to a sensible outcome. Is that a reasonable take on it?
That's exactly right. And the steps get us to either A, selling what we own, which is just a lease, which would get us maybe 5.5 million, yeah. Or B, being able to coordinate the sale of the lease with the freehold and getting an upside on that 5.5 million. So that these are all a set of sequential steps that get us to those two options, preferably the second.
Okay. Then is there anyone that has a view or would like to speak further on this matter, can I ask if anyone has any recommendations that we proceed with options A through, or recommendations A through E, and give these guys a mandate to try and do the best they can here with what is clearly, you know, not an ideal situation, but looks recoverable. All right, I'm not seeing anyone object. We'll take that on consensus as carried to move forward. Thank you, guys. Good luck with that. A lot of hard work there. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, John. Moving on then to item 3.1. Steve, we're still with you, I believe. The Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Agritech Sector Strategy, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, it's me again. I'm just introducing here a presentation from our contractors who've been contracted, busily working away to start to develop our agritech sector. We commissioned development of the agritech sector with Promar Limited back in February, and obviously they got to work, but then with COVID, we slightly got slowed down a bit over the summer. But obviously this strategy was developed during that period from March to October, and has involved consultation with multiple organisations and businesses, and we're bringing this draft to you today just to get your inputs. I'll let John cover off the presentation, and then obviously we can discuss after that.
Thank you. So we're joined by John Giles and Sarah Hughes from Promar, Steve, yes?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for asking us to join you. I think there's been some documents circulated in advance of this meeting by Louisa. And actually we were asked not to sort of go, we've got a PowerPoint ready if you want us to run through it quickly, but we were asked to almost go straight into Q&A. So I can run through some of the key points of the sort of findings if you'd like us to, and then go into Q&A. But I know that you're running to quite a tight schedule, so I'll be guided by you, Steve, and Mr. Adams as to what you'd like us to do in the time we've got.
Let me put it to the board where they are with this. We've all seen the papers, so questions. I guess I'm looking to Tina as our resident expert in this field.
Yeah. I think it would be helpful, John, if you and Sarah could sort of give us a high-level view of how you see the sector and what your sort of emerging thoughts are for moving forward.
So do you want us just to run through those slides quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I can do that. I'll have to share my screen. Can people see that?
Yeah, if you could keep it nice and concise though, John, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll try not to get too carried away. Obviously been working on the project for quite a long time, so there's we could probably talk for the rest of the day if we wanted to, but we'll just try and get through some of the key points basically. Look, so you know a bit about our methodology that's talked about. So lots of desk research, an online survey, and then consultations, and then the development of a draft report. I think where we would sort of start from is that the asset base for an agri-tech cluster in your part of the world is very, very strong. The main farming strengths have historically been in arable and horticultural crops rather than livestock. There's obviously very strong academic and R&D prowess. You've got some of the biggest agri-tech businesses in the whole UK in your region. There's a strong supply chain. There's some very good networks already in place. And even in the time that we've been involved in this project, there's been sort of quite a strong performance in terms of attracting inward investment. And I think one of the things we've said in the report is that if you went to other parts of the country and said this is what you could have on your doorstep to develop an agri-tech sector, they bite your hands off. You're in a very strong position. I think our view would be that you are probably the leading part of the country for this type of activity. But Yeah, so, but there's almost this perfect storm out there, basically, which will present both threat and opportunity to your agri-tech sector. So there's a new agricultural bill going through Parliament, rather laboriously, where farmers will be sort of reimbursed for farming for public goods and public services rather than just production. Brexit, obviously, there's a good deal of uncertainty there. New trade deals with the US and Oceania. There's a food strategy being led by Henry Dimbleby. That's all pointing towards a sort of more healthy diet and a more sustainable supply chain for the UK in general. There's a 25-year environmental plan. On we go. Agri-tech strategy, COVID impacts. There's this perfect storm almost. We're in the middle of it. It's not going to go away in the very near future. And I think what we've sort of said is that in the report is that these supply chain shocks almost tend to accelerate what's already happening, and that when we get through COVID and Brexit, what we do know is there'll be some sort of supply chain, so another supply chain shock around the corner. The best will thrive. Some will fall by the wayside at all stages of the supply chain. But your region is packed full of some of the best companies. So I think our view, what we concluded in our report, is that the Cambridge and Peterborough region is actually, will it be unimpacted by this? No, of course not. But you're in a good position to get through the worst of this and then take forward of the opportunities that are there for when things are a bit more certain in the future. Two key themes that go through the report is the sort of impact of policy push. So agricultural bill, national food strategy, they're all pointing in the same direction, to a more sustainable approach to farming and the use of agri-tech per se, and more efficient and productive food production. And then the commercial pool, the demands made on farmers, food companies and their suppliers in turn, by the major retailers, by food service companies and food processing companies, and completely different timescales. The ag bill might take 7 years to fully implement in the UK. A trade deal with the US will have an implementation period, we assume. Supermarkets and food processors want things to happen much quicker, basically, and they use this sustainable food production as a sort of point of difference in a pretty fierce market, basically. And agri-tech products and services can help achieve all of this, basically, and this is where we believe your region is at its best. Some results from the survey and the consultation process. When you talk to people about how important is the future of agri-tech for them, they rate it on a scale of 9 out of 10. In terms of the local provision, considering you've got this sort of very strong asset base, local provision is only ranked as being 6 out of 10. And so there's a bit of a disconnect between what you've got in the region and you could offer your region and what your region seems to believe is out there, basically. But we do know that companies in the Cambridge and Peterborough region will buy products and services from the local region, but they're also just as likely to go outside of the region. The region is packed full of SME type businesses, but there's also some very large and influential ag tech providers there.
John, can I just ask a quick question on your first 2 bullets there? It's a clarification. So, because I'm a bit confused about the message there. So, agri-tech is rated 9 out of 10 by who? And who has said the local provision is only 6 out of 10? Are we talking about 2 different sets of people?
No, we're talking about the same people, basically. So the message there is agri-tech is a really big sort of top priority for all the people we spoke to across the spectrum of respondents in the course of the study. But it's interesting, on the basis that so I think it's a case of sometimes you don't know what you've got when it's on your doorstep, being blunt. But so it's a very highly rated issue for the future. But in terms of the local provision, maybe people are being a bit modest, maybe, there's a bit of a disconnect between the strength of what you've got in the region and the ability of companies and businesses to sometimes recognise what's there available to them.
This was captured in a survey, was it?
We did an online survey in conjunction with Agri-Tech East, where we had a fairly robust response rate, and then we did I think it was 27 face-to-face consultations, which during a COVID period were carried out largely not all on a remote basis.
All right, thank you, Andy.
Challenges and opportunities. climate change, water usage, low carbon supply chains, use of big data. Labour is probably the biggest issue, maybe the single biggest issue for everybody in agriculture and food, not just in the Cambridge and Peterborough region, but across the whole UK. So this is leading towards the more rapid adoption of robotics and supply chain automation. And what we also ask for people is about sort of where your customer base is. So these are businesses and organisations that are based within the region, but again, a high percentage of their business is now they are supplying the Cambridge and Peterborough region, but they're supplying the rest of the UK, and in some cases the rest of the world. So it's not just a sort of a localized supply and demand situation. 4 key themes to the strategy. One is the development of a narrative. Secondly is the need to be sort of pretty focused on what we're doing without falling into the stage of or the danger of being overly prescriptive. Integration and synergy with others, and supporting business to develop growth. And we can just go through these really quickly. But yeah, so the narrative is, I think there's a great opportunity to have a very bold vision for the future of the region's agri-tech sector and consolidate Cambridge and Peterborough as the leading centre for agri-tech in the UK. Promote this strong regional narrative. All industry sectors can be part of it, but there's going to be some that are probably more important than others, basically. Create a positive perception without being too prescriptive. The areas where you're particularly strong would be in arable and horticulture. That's not to say that things can't be done in, say, the livestock sectors either, but that's where you've got preeminence. And you might argue that other, if you wanted to do things in the livestock sector, there may be other parts of the UK where they are stronger in those areas than Cambridge and Peterborough. And this is where there may be an opportunity to work with others outside the immediate region. So ensuring high levels of interaction between academia and the private sector, promoting the region's capability. That's sort of referring to this sort of, it's a 9 out of 10 issue, but it's only a sort of 6 out of 10 recognition of what you've got there within the region. You need to gain the buy-in and support of the region's key stakeholders, clearly, be both public and private sector. And I think it's really important that, one of the roles of the board is, so you've got to make sure that you keep hold of your key players in the region, and ensure the strategy covers the full supply chain and not just bits of it, because again, that's where you're strongest. The focus of the strategy, we believe, based on the work we've done and our own thinking, is that there's sort of a couple of areas, various supply chain technologies, but in particular the whole environmental and sustainability expertise that's in with the region, and that this boils down to your expertise and skills across the region in climate change mitigation, soil health, the role of natural capital. One of the real big drivers in agriculture and food and agri-tech at the moment is the development of carbon neutral supply chains, more efficient use of water, more automation. There's some fantastic examples in your region where you're already doing this, but it's all about producing a more productive, competitive and resilient supply chain. And in many cases, making sure that when that actual additional value is created, it's retained within the region. I think it's the last couple of slides coming up. So sort of, again, recognizing that your agri-tech strategy, if you want it to, and we believe it should do, it strongly links and complements mainly all the other objectives of the regional strategies you have, and the UK agri-tech strategy in particular, and also linking into the COVID framework report that's been commissioned. You need to get high level endorsement. Again, this is a big role for the business board, I believe, across the region in London, where there's pots of money, basically, and building on the success of some of the things that you've already done. Not least I think the Eastern Agri-Tech Growth Initiative is a sort of shining example. Basically, don't be afraid to link to other people or other organisations in other parts of the UK. We strongly believe that one-on-one makes three. And the size of the prize is considerably increased by working. Trying to do all of it on your own within the region will be hard work and might even lead to duplication of effort in some cases. And certainly develop or strengthen the existing agri-tech networks that exist in the region, and don't fall into the trap of sometimes thinking, well, what we need to do is create something all over again. I don't think there's a justification for that. The networks you've got in the region are often very good. They need strengthening, not sort of reinventing. And then supporting business growth, so become a centre of excellence for training and upskilling. We're going to need a better, you know, as the agri-tech sector becomes stronger and more influential in not just in Cambridge and Peterborough, but in the rest of the UK, in the rest of the world, we will need better skilled people to make sure we can facilitate all that, offering consistent support to local businesses, particularly still, you know, funding, signposting for support, this type of thing. There's plenty of opportunities within the region, but I think we've also concluded in our work that, you know, don't be afraid to look outside the region for where the real mid to long term growth, and you'll need new partnerships there. And that might be in parts of the UK, other parts of the UK, but it could be other parts of the world. There's a huge demand for agri-tech in around the world, particularly I think in places, we believe in places like the Middle East, parts of Africa, maybe parts of Southeast Asia as well. Europe has got or continental Europe has got a fairly well developed, you know, relatively mature agri-tech sector, but particularly in emerging markets, there's I think, you know, it's hard work, but there's lots of opportunities there. Basically, maybe again, if there's other things you do, one of the questions we anticipated might be, you know, what should we do? And we've got probably a little list of them here. But one of the things you could do is looking at things like, you know, better demonstration facilities for end users. Most people who are going to invest in ag-tech want to see it in action at some stage. The role of the business board, you know, sort of leverage your influence wherever you can. Probably have a relatively small core team to spearhead all this effort. You know, provide strong leadership to fulfill this narrative and basically see agri-tech as a real priority in the region, basically. And, you know, if you had to sort of try and sum this all up, what are you trying to do there? We know that we're in the middle of a perfect storm, or we're entering into a perfect storm at the moment. We know that supply chain shocks happen every 2 years. Once we come through Brexit, once we come through COVID, which we will at some stage, there'll be another supply chain shock around the corner, probably less than 2 years away, and we need to sort of collectively be helping agribusinesses become more resilient, flexible to these sort of volatile and uncertain market conditions, but also seize the opportunities that are inevitably going to exist as well. And I think that might be the end of the presentation. I hope I've been able to go through that quickly enough.
Thank you.
But we wouldn't expect to say all that and not get some questions.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just ask Steve, were those slides in the pack somewhere? I didn't see them at all.
Apologies, they weren't. I think Domenico might want to come in on this one, but we were advised not to put the slides through.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. So we were going to pick it up as part of the activity update meeting on the 24th of November in more detail. So we were going to circulate the presentation to members, which we have done, and we will do again, just as a reminder. But we really wanted to just talk about the strategy at the meeting today. But no harm done. We've gone through the presentation, but can we only take urgent questions now, because I'm mindful of time, and then we can pick up any more detail with members when we go through the activity update next in a few weeks.
Yeah, just a standing point, just from my point of view. Sorry to be pernickety, but if there are presentations that are being brought to the board, that the board members need to see them before the meeting. It's not fair to the board members. It's not fair to the presenter either that we're having to hurry them through and not get time to.
We would be more than willing, Mr. Adams, to join you at a later date if that was, you know, people wanted more time to consider what we were saying. Only if it's appropriate.
Yeah, thank you for that offer. I've got hands up from Tina and Faye. Can we go to Faye first, and maybe Tina could wrap up for us on this one? Appreciate it.
Thank you, Austin. So noting Dom's direction not to start a huge discussion on this, thank you obviously for the work. I do have some quite detailed responses to this in terms of, is it agri-food, is it agri-tech? And for me, I think we really need the vision, and I don't feel that we've got a robust vision here. So I would very much like to go into quite a little bit more detail on this before the board accepts it. But knowing that you've just told me I can't actually say too much, that's the comment I would like to make at the moment, unless you would like me to expand.
I think that's sorry, I think that's fine, Faye. I mean, it wouldn't do any harm to have a separate breakout session on this with interested parties if you feel there's more to be done here. Anxious not to get in the way. I think this has been a long time coming, but we need to be sure that we're all happy with it as well. So, Tina, thank you.
I feel that what John's presented so far is a picture of the landscape, but Faye's right that the vision for where we go and what we do about it needs to be developed further. And if you think about what it says in the LIS, and it's actually in one of our papers, about strengthening the university spin-out culture and capability in Cambridge and developing the scale-up and tech transfer capacity in Peterborough and the Fens. And I think we do now need to revisit that and say, how has what Promar has done so far, how does it inform that and how does it help us to build on that? I think it is important, this question about, are we talking agri-tech or agri-food? I mean, that's something which the Eastern Agri-Tech Growth Initiative struggled with throughout its life. You know, where does agri-tech begin and end? So I think it'd be great to have Faye more involved in some of these discussions.
All right, super job. Hi, Andy's got his hand raised. Is that from before, Andy, or is it a fresh question?
That's so just to endorse what's been said. I mean, I think it's a really useful summary of what's going on. But for me, the vision bit and then the kind of tangible actions beyond the call to arms of reaching out to other bits of the country and so on, tangibly, what interventions could the business board be promoting for agri-tech is what we need to get to. And that's the bit that I'm missing at the moment. But I think that can be in a follow-up conversation.
Thank you, Andy. And Jason.
Just quickly to add on what everyone else has said, it'd be good to see the grand challenges specifically facing our region when it comes to agri-tech. I think it's always good to position these as like, here are the 5 key big issues that if you were to have a challenge for startups who have solutions or interventions from the business board, it was very clear. And each one of those could be fleshed out in more detail. So what are those, let's say 5 big challenges specifically for our region that innovation or some intervention could address?
Thank you, Jason. Okay, this report was presented as a draft, just to be clear. And so I think John and Sarah have had some good feedback during the meeting. If there's a way that could be captured and you guys could engage to put some more flesh on the bones around some of that thinking, I think that would be very, very useful. If the board are content, can we move on noting that? Sorry, Rebecca, did you want to speak?
No, Sarah.
Sarah, sorry.
I just wanted to, I don't know if it's clear to the board that there is a full report. So that presentation that you saw was meant to be included in your board minutes as we understood it. So it wasn't the presentation we were going to give you. So just so you understand, there is a full strategy report that will support what John mentioned earlier.
Again, in discussion sort of leading up to this, we said, look, we can send you a 125-page blockbuster. We were sort of advised that maybe something a bit more readable for this sort of. I assume you've got lots of things to read for this sort of meeting, but there is, and I've taken some notes of what people have been saying here, and I think probably we can. I wouldn't disagree with any of them in particular, but also in the full report there is a lot about these sorts of areas as well. I mean, we'd be happy to sort of take consolidated feedback over the next week or so, maybe through Louisa or you know, or one of your group.
Okay, thank you.
The key thing has now been raised by 2 or 3 people around the screen, and it is this question of what interventions could the business board make to improve the situation.
if I might offer a bit of guidance, I'm a very simple thinker. I would have just 3 slides. What's the vision? What are the challenges? And what are we going to do about it? That's all we want to know. And then we can engage and help you to deliver on that.
Okay. So the 3 slides were, what do we do?
Well, what's the vision? Where are we trying to get to?
Yeah.
What are the challenges? And what are the actions to get there?
Yeah. Okay.
I personally, I'd much rather see that than a 50, 60-page report. That's all well and good. Anyway, sorry, we do need to move on. So let me thank you sincerely for your time coming along today and the information you've presented. I think that is very valuable. We're noting the fact that it is a draft and therefore it's appropriate that we provide some feedback, and that there'll be further iterations and refinements of that. And there are a number of board members who would be keen to help, I'm sure. Perhaps Tina could take the lead on coordinating that. Yeah,
look, we thrive on feedback. I don't think we'd expect to do this sort of project and not get feedback, to be honest. And we would, if someone can coordinate so the various questions that the people around the screen have, that's fine. And then we can, we'd be happy to join you at some occasion in the future and present those 3 slides.
All right. Okay. The recommendation then for the board is to note what we've seen and heard today, and give us the opportunity for some feedback. Can we all agree that that's noted and move on? If anyone has any objections, please shout. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
We will leave you. Thank you very much.
Let's move on to item 3.2. Thank you. So item 3.2 is the COVID-19 Local Economic Recovery Strategy. And can I invite Brian Hyland to present the report? I would then like to invite Patrick White and Nathan Walwork from Metro Dynamics to address the board. I'd like to remind members that following the agenda publication on the 2nd of November, an updated version of Appendix 2 to this report was published and circulated on the 9th of November. And again, this is a really, very interesting and complicated series of things that are going on. So I would ask people, please, if we can, try and keep things concise. I'm mindful that we're running over. Brian.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Hi, Business Board, good afternoon. So just by way of background, the first draft of the Local Economic Recovery Strategy was presented to you all back in September, and this agenda item is just to present the latest version of the strategy document, which has been adapted to reflect 2 main activities that have been undertaken since then. Firstly, we've been undertaking a detailed analysis of all the latest insights into the economic and business impacts of COVID-19. And some of you will have seen those outputs with the COVID-19 dashboards, etc. And we've also undertaken an analysis of all the various planned interventions based on their cost, funding availability, and also their potential positive impact over the 3 stages of the recovery cycle. Now, we've done those 2 activities alongside our partners, Metro Dynamics, who, as the Chair has said, we've invited along today, and they're just going to talk you through the main changes and findings in this LERS, although you will find a lot of the document familiar to the first version. Before I pass you across, I just want to stress once again that the LERS is a live document, and we'll be continually stress testing it against all the insights that we are gaining through our dashboard work on a fortnightly and monthly basis. And with that in mind, actually, we fully intend to bring a 2nd edition to the LERS before you in January. So against that backdrop, can I just pass across to Patrick and Nathan, who can talk you through the main changes and the way they've reorganised the document for us all. Thank you. Over to you, Patrick, Nathan.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, Chair and members. I'll keep this very, very short because I'm very conscious of time, and I'm not going to repeat anything Brian said, apart from to emphasise that this is a live document. It's a live strategy, and things have changed very rapidly and quite dramatically since you last considered it. So what it does is to essentially lock in the actions which have been already agreed and funded and are starting now. And then as you move through the course of the next few months, gives you a chance to look at the kind of slightly longer term kind of new actions that are needed against the data that kind of becomes available as we understand more about, you know, the impact on Q3 and Q4 and the emerging impact on employment and so on. But it doesn't, that process of evolution doesn't change or slow down the kind of delivery of the things that you've already agreed and funded. We've not changed the long-term kind of goals and objectives here at all. I'll jump straight to just a page, kind of page 10 in the strategy, or page 180 in your pack, what you'll see there is a set of tables that, as Brian says, groups the interventions, most of which you've seen previously, by primary interventions, things that are funded and agreed and are happening; secondary interventions, which are things that either don't yet have clear cost benefit data or don't yet have kind of funding; and then what we've called tertiary interventions, which are those longer term kind of ideas which local partners and local authority partners were very keen to have in, but which neither funding or kind of, you know, a lot of clarity about how and what, how they could be delivered and what they're going to deliver has sort of yet being worked up. So they're very much kind of keep in view things. The next kind of set of changes which we've made and will kind of, if you like, continue to make from sort of page 19 onwards are to reflect the latest data that is available at the time, and really importantly to keep our eye on the emerging kind of scenarios, which is on page 26 of the strategy and page 196 of your pack, to make sure that we are checking back the whole time to make sure that sort of emerging thinking about new actions is consistent with where we actually are on the, you know, on the kind of curve of sort of, you know, existing and kind of potential scenarios. Now clearly, you know, this is probably not the time for a sort of long debate about where we are in terms of economic impact, but as we understand more about the Q3 impacts and then the impacts of the current lockdown, we'll know where somewhere between kind of, you know, worst case and kind of medium case we actually are. But we would anticipate a significant output slowdown in Q3 and then from this kind of November, early December kind of lockdown. So we've effectively ruled out an immediate kind of V-shaped return to pre-COVID growth trends for now. So that's a change from the past paper. The thing that we've not yet done, because we don't know, but will know by January, or hope to know by January, is a bit more about the shape of the post-Brexit arrangement. And at that point, I think you should expect and should want a slightly more detailed discussion about how both the impacts of this December lockdown and where we get to with Brexit shape a kind of set of discussions about interventions and kind of actions from here on in. So my advice to the board at the moment is that the actions that you've already agreed, funded and have in place are essentially good for now. There's been no need to kind of dramatically change those, apart from to roll out the additional government support. But the really next important point for this kind of recovery plan is over kind of later December and early January, where you need to start looking further ahead once, you know, we see the impacts of this December lockdown and of Brexit, as I've said. So I'll leave it there. My recommendation is that this is kind of good for now, and that we should have a longer conversation about a sort of more fundamental, more worked through revision, if you like, as some new data becomes available later in the year, early next. Thanks, Chair. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any particular questions here? Well, one comment I have is I'm very pleased to see the work on the dashboard that Metro Dynamics have been doing for us to And that inevitably will not have been shared with all the members of the board here, but those of us that have been fortunate enough to have an early insight into that, some grand work going on behind the scenes to provide more up-to-date dynamic data in a series of dashboards around the impact of COVID and the extent to which that can then inform our decision making as time goes by. That is definitely to be applauded, and thank you for that. Are there any other questions here, or I will move to recommend that, sorry?
It's Andy, just a quick
Andy?
thing. So two things. One, to just second what you've just said. I mean, I think that the work on the dashboard have been super. The other thing actually is just to congratulate the people involved in the alerts, because I think this has really moved on enormously from when we first saw it, and it's much crisper. And that ability to trace through why we're making the interventions back to some of the things we're trying to achieve, I think it's a really clear document. So it's a really good piece of work. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I've got hands raised by Tina and Faye. Tina, would you like to go first?
Yeah, mine is just a small point on what we're referring to as sectors. You know, it's like we've got these 4 sectors from the list, and then we've got these other sectors, and I'm not really sure they are actually all comparable as sectors. It's probably just terminology, but I would say that some of the things are probably more like underpinning or facilitating capacities. And not the same thing, you know, as a sector like agri-tech or life sciences. And I would say that because there's no point having a thriving transport sector and nothing else. You know, transport, construction, and those things actually underpin the list rather than, if you like, dilute it. So it is really just terminology.
Thank you, Tina. Good feedback. Faye?
Yep, just quickly. So I think you all know I sit on the ERSG on behalf of the business board. So I think the primary, secondary, tertiary categorisation is really brilliant for just focusing the mind. What I would like to see as a business board, though, is us really starting to look at those tertiary ones and trying to help to do some degree of prioritization or putting others in there. So I think, you know, this was very much almost given to us. Here's everything that we've got on the plate. I think we need to start filling in with some other interventions too. And if anyone has any input, then I sit on those calls every week or bi-weekly. Please do just send me a note with an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Tina, do you have another question or comment? No, okay. I don't see any more. So the recommendation here is to recommend to the combined authority to an approval of an update of the local economic recovery strategy. Unless anyone's going to shout to say they want to change it, then I'm going to move that we do just that. And thank Patrick and Nathan and the whole team at Metro Dynamics and the officers for their help and support in keeping on top of this with all the moving parts. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, let's move on to item 3.3, the Kickstart scheme, please. If I might invite Laura to present the report on the Kickstart scheme. Do we have Laura?
Hi, good afternoon.
Oh, there you go. All right, Laura.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'd like to introduce to you agenda item 3.3, the Kickstart scheme. Business Board is asked to recommend that the Combined Authority Board approve the Business Growth Service to act as a gateway organisation to the Kickstart scheme across the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area, and approve the Business Growth Service to act as the primary referral partner for the Kickstart scheme for requests that are received in via the CPCA. The 2 billion scheme was announced as a part of the Plan for Jobs 2020 speech, with the intention of creating up to 350,000 jobs for young people. This is a DWP initiative offering 6-month work placements for 16 to 24-year-olds with the ambition of them going into sustainable employment. Businesses can access this 12-month scheme at little or no cost to themselves, which should support their economic recovery. DWP are encouraging the establishment of gateway organisations. These are organisations who have experience in managing partnership arrangements and have robust financial and governance structures. The organisations will coordinate placements from smaller organisations that are looking to secure funding for less than 30 placements. To ensure we have a coordinated approach and in line with BEI's strategic desire, it's proposed that the Growth Hub will act as a gateway organisation for the Gateway organisation. This will be via the Business Growth Service. From a financial perspective, funding will flow from DWP to the Business Growth Service and then directly into the employer. Payment profiles are currently at policy stage with DWP, but wages will be paid by the employer and claimed back in arrears. The funding that can be secured for the Kickstart scheme is paid at 3 parts. We have £1,500 for a start payment. This is to cover any onboarding costs, training, uniform, or anything else that's needed. £300 for the Gateway organisation to fund their activity, and then 25 hours per week is paid at national minimum wage for a period of 6 months. To ensure payments are received by employers in a timely manner, it's proposed that funding will flow through the Business Growth Service rather than the Combined Authority in the first instance. Regionally, there is the potential to secure 700 placements with the initial payment plus a portion of the provision of training. This can generate a potential revenue of £472,000 per annum. This would fund a team that would be able to work on a local level across our 6 local authority levels to stimulate demand and work as a coordinated team sharing best practice. Whilst funding would be received directly to the Business Growth Service, the Kickstart metrics and performance management will be conducted as part of the wider contract management. We believe that without a coordinated approach, there is a risk of having multiple representatives across the economy that will be of variable capacities and capabilities, which may give rise to reputational risk of the scheme and in turn wider risk to our wider economic recovery. Thank you all for your time and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Are there any questions here? Does anyone have any positive or negative views on the relative merits of using the Business Growth Service to help to administer this? Let's not get caught up in a debate about whether the fund principles are good, bad, or indifferent. That's not in our gift, unfortunately. But what is to decide how we manage and administer it. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Then can I ask if anyone has any objections to the Business Growth Service being used as the vehicle to administer this? I'm not seeing any objections, so we'll consider that carried. Thank you, Laura. Good job. Good luck with that. Thank you. If we may now move on to item 3.4, which is the Business Board Annual Report and Delivery Plan. Domenico will present the report. I'd like to remind members that following the agenda publication on the 2nd of November, an updated version of Appendix 2 of this report was published and circulated on the 6th of November.
Thank you, Chair. Dear members, this item is to present the Business Board Annual Report and Delivery Plan to the board for sign-off and to approve to go onto the Combined Authority Board for sign-off and then submission onto our colleagues at BEIS. The Business Board is required to publish an annual report and delivery plan annually, and this sets out the activities of previous 12 months along with our ambitions for the coming year up until March 2021. Sorry, we're halfway through the year. The annual report is included under Appendix 2. That sets out our deliverables for the previous 12 months for 1920. It also reflects aspects of the Business and Skills Directorate as the Business Board is fully integrated within the Combined Authority. Appendix 1 is our delivery plan, and this is a document within which we set out our strategic objectives and our operational delivery aspirations for the year. These have obviously been adapted to accommodate for COVID response, including the LERS, as we've just heard, and the strategic refresh that we're undertaking around the sector strategies, skill strategies, and also the LIS. It also sets out our key investments that we've set out for the 12 months around strategic funds, including, as mentioned previously, strategic investment from combined authority around the University of Peterborough, adult education budget, and our Market Towns programme. So unless there are any specific questions on the appendices from board members, this item is presented to you to sign off and approve, so that can be submitted to base. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you for a well constructed report. There's some amazing things in there actually when we look back, and some challenges ahead. Are there any particular questions? I'd be keen to move on with this.
Austin,
Yes, Faye?
can we just have it spell checked, proofread, please, before it's submitted anywhere? Thank you.
Yes, Faye, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Faye. So with that caveat, can I take it that no one has any objections to us approving the Business Board annual report for submission then through to the Combined Authority en route to Bays? Please shout now. Okay, thank you. We'll take that as a unanimous decision. Thank you. Thank you to the officers. Thank you, Dom, for presenting it. It captures a lot of really great work in there. Thank you. May we then move on to item 3.5, business market engagement update. That's Brian, please, to come back and present that report, please.
Thanks, Chair. This paper, everybody, is an update on our business and market engagement. Now, back in January 2020, the Business Board approved what we called then the Business and Skills Promotional Campaign. And this paper is an update on the activities and the progress achieved since that paper. You've been provided with 3 appendices. The first one details an update of activities since April that have been undertaken to raise the profile of the Business Board and the Business and Skills team and our various activities. The second appendix gives you an insight into our planned activities, but this is very much a live document. And item number 3 is a summary of the PR activities that I know is something that is a priority as well. And just by way of a recap, the campaign is all about raising our profile so that we're hitting our target audiences to engage with our various interventions. So this piece of work cuts across every single thing that we're doing. So with that in mind and with that update in mind, just I'm asking the Business Board to note the update and to note the future activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Brian. Good to keep that going. We could always do better about singing from the trees about all the good stuff that's going on, especially in current times. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Can I take it that the recommendation here is to note the activities here on the business and market activity, and to note the future activities to drive increased engagement with target audiences? Can I ask if anyone has any objections to that? If not, we will move with the recommendation to note that. Okay, thank you. We're almost there. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, a couple of final points. Business Board headlines for the Combined Authority. In and amongst the 300 or so pages, there are quite a number of recommendations. Actually, I counted 14. all of which we're taking forward unanimously with the exception of one which is moved by a majority. I won't go through them all in detail, but to summarise, we've got the LGF management review view and where we're going to port the 2 million of funding. We've got the LGF new projects and their approval to go for recommendation. We've got the COVID-19 economic review strategy to present. We've got the Kickstart scheme, and we've got the Business Board annual report to put forward. We've got a bit of time, I think, between now and the next CPHCA meeting, so I'm sure the officers will do a grand job of pulling all that together in good order for a very efficient meeting with the CPCA later in the month. Thank you for that. The final item here is the Business Board forward plan, which has been circulated in the minutes. Do members have any comments or queries on the forward plan? It may well be there's a number of topics that we've talked about today that might give rise to us wanting to think about embellishing some of that going forward, and quite how and when we do that. Anyone have any particular strong feelings? Anything missing? No? Thank you. Okay, then the next Business Board meeting will be on Tuesday, the 12th of January, after Christmas. Crikey, doesn't time fly? Let me thank everyone for their time today. It's remarkable that we've got back on time actually within a few minutes or so of the agenda. There's some really great stuff going on. Very, very grateful to the officers for all their hard work and support in moving these things forward for us, and their time and effort in actually constructing them and having the challenge of bringing the detail to this meeting such that we can understand it and make informed decisions to move forward. Thank you for that. Good job. Thanks everyone for your participation. Hopefully we'll all talk again before Christmas. If not, I'll send you a little Christmas message before then. Thanks everyone.
So, Chair, thank you. We have the activity update meeting on the 24th of November, so you will see everyone before Christmas.
All right, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks.